and gals, it's Sammy from UnrealTek.net in the 5th video on making a Battlefield 2 style game clone in Unreal Engine 4 using networking and blueprints. I'm going to set up a respawn system. I hope to get 3 to 8 players respawning and being able to check for safe respawns while tying it into our network setup and our health to death setup with our current version. So open up the project or Unreal, remember create your way, and let's get started. I totally recorded the entire video and forgot to turn on my microphone. So instead what I'm going to do, this one will be shorter for you guys, but you might have to watch it twice, is I'm going to show you exactly what I did instead of going back and figuring out what I changed and so on and so forth. And I'll go through everything in more detail, at least. What I've done, if we go to edit project settings, first of all, in maps and modes, I set the default map to the third person example map since that's what we're testing on. I set the default game mode to our BP game mode since that's what we're using, and I realized we didn't set our game instance class, so I set the game instance class to our game instance. Under input for testing, I made an action mapping called suicide to K because I was having troubles debugging the respawn system. If we open up BP Teams data under our Teams folder, I added a variable called team number, editable just like the rest, which is an integer with the default value of -1. Since we're going to start with teams red and blue, that will be 0 and 1 respectively. Create that variable, compile and save, and then open up red and blue. And blue will be team number 1, and red will be team number 0. At the moment, we're just working with team red. You'll see under the BP player start respawns, we have team number 0 for all of them. And so now the player 1, 2, 3, 4 is just kind of a cosmetic thing. So if we open up that BP, which is under our blueprints, the BP player start respawn, I added another variable, exactly the same basically, team number, editable, set to default 0. This is the team index that owns this player start in a team-based game. So it's an integer, editable team number, set to 0, compile and save that. And then I just put 4 player respawns. I was having some bugs where the player was respawning beneath the floor, so I raised them up a bit, and I also to about 300 centimeters, so about 100 centimeters taller than character, and I spaced them apart. The game state, we started doing some stuff there. So if we open BP game state, I added a variable called teams data, which is an array of our BP teams data blueprint that we just created, or that we just edited, sorry, and its replication is set to replicated. Then we have defined teams, which is the exact same thing, but it's an array of the class, so that we're able to define our teams, our game state, and I set 2 elements, red is 0, blue is 1. And then, just for testing, I simply set up a quick setup for the teams. We get our defined teams array. We do an array get 0, so just team red. Then we spawn in a team red. The owner is self, or the game state, and we set it to always spawn, so that we always have team red in there, and I have it spawning way up in the air, 9,999 in all values. And then I take the return value, add unique to the team's data array. That is that. Next up in our game modes, under BP game mode, I created a new graph called MP Steam Old Logic, and I took the entire respawn player event logic and I just moved it into this graph in case we needed it for some reason. And this is the 2-player setup, and we'll get rid of that once we can. We can't now, but I'm just saving it just in case. So got rid of that. In the event graph, we changed things a little bit, however. On post login still does the exact same thing. This stuff just isn't needed now, so it still goes through this. Although I realized the for each loop had to be remade. It was it was putting out player starts instead of BP player start respawn reference. So delete the for each loop, make a new one, connect the array and the execution, and then connect these wires back up. The one that goes to add unique, the one that goes to player start tag, and the one that goes down here to the other add unique. And then we still cast to player state, set the player number based on player array length, and then we still cast to BP player controller and do a client post login. Same as before. However, what I added, where did I even add it? I didn't even, it's called from the player controller. So I added a function called respawn player. It's got an input called respawn controller in, which is of the type controller, just controller reference. And as you can see, I was debugging a lot. What it does is it goes into a sequence. And so the first thing it does is an isValid with an input object of our respawn controller in, and then we get the controlled pawn based on that, and we take the return value into the isValid. So we're basically checking if it is valid, and we call the respawn function, that means the player is somehow still alive. So what we do in that case is we take the controlled pawn reference and we cast it to the base character blueprint. As that, we then call our character death function, and then we unpossess the respawn controller in. Make sure you don't set to unpossess the controlled pawn. You want to unpossess the controlled the respawn controller in. And if the cast fails, just as a redundancy, we unpossess. And then in the second part of the sequence, what we do, I also did a check for overlapping actors, but I got rid of that for the time being. What we do is we spawn an actor from class, and that class is default pawn class, which you can get by just right-clicking and default pawn class, get it, because it's our game mode. And that's of course set to BP base character. We set it to try to adjust location, but don't spawn if still colliding. Although that might cause bugs. We should try to adjust location, but always spawn. Anyways, and the owner of that actor, we bring all the way back up to our respawn controller in. And so the spawn transform location and rotation is get actor rotation and location of the output of this other function we created. It's a pure constant function. So as you can see, it has a controller reference in and a BP player start respawn reference out. So let's look at that function first. So all it does is it has a local variable called output spawn points, which is an array of BP player start respawns. And so what we do is we have our input of respawning controller in as controller reference, and we also have our output spawn point out. So we pick one spawn point, and it is a BP player start respawn, or whatever BP player start respawn. Yep. So what we do is we get all actors of class of the BP player start respawn. Then we do a for each loop on it. And what we do is we get the team number variable we created on it, and we check if it's equal to, go to the respawn controller in, get the player state, which is just a default value, cast to BP player state, and right click and convert to pure cast, and get the team number off of there, make sure they're equal. Then the loop body is obviously that branch first. So basically, does our controller team own this spawn point? Basically, it's checking to see if we're allowed to spawn there based on teams. And if that's true, then we just add unique to our output spawn points local variable, which is the array element. So it'll be a BP player start respawn reference. Once that's completed, so it's iterated through all the respawns and it's found all the ones owned by our controller's team, then we return a single spawn point out, which is a BP player start respawn reference, and right now we're just getting it randomly. So what we're doing is we're taking our output spawn points local variable, we're doing an array get, and the integer is a random integer in range, and the range is length minus 1. So min 0, max length minus 1. So if we have 4 spawn points, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then we get the length, 4 elements, minus 1. So 0 to 3 index, since it's 0 based. So we find the spawn point there, and we get its location and active rotation, and the respawn controller in target is, of course, the respawn controller in the respawn player function. The target is self. That's just basic default right there. So after that, after we spawn in the default pawn class, so after we spawn in a new player, we then just possess it. So we take the return value as the in pawn on a possess node. As you can see, it only runs on the server, and the target is the respawn controller in. So that is that. So that's what we changed in the game mode. That's our new respawn setup. So it gets all the respawns that's owned by our, well, first it makes sure our player's dead and unpossesses it. Then it finds a valid respawn point that our team owns, and then it picks one at random, spawns the player there, and possesses it. Moving on to, I guess, the player controller. So, I didn't change anything here, except for I added, as I was testing, I don't think this is needed anymore, so we'll try getting rid of it later, but for now, in UnrealTek, we get controlled pawn, so whatever this player controller is controlling, we cast to our BP base character, we get the character's health, and we check if it's less than or equal to 0, aka our BR dead. It goes into a branch. If that's true, then we go to a switch has authority, and remote, so the client calls request player respawn, which is this custom event up here, which is request player respawn. It runs on server and it's reliable. We want our player respawns to be reliable. And so the authority, or we'll go over the custom event. What it does is it just does a debug print string for now, and it just says player controller request respawn. So we're just saying that somebody's requesting a respawn. Then what we do is we just get game mode, so the game mode we were just working in, we cast to it, and again right click, convert to peer cast, and then we drag off of its return value and we call respawn player. And make sure the respawn controller in, make sure you make a reference to self, because otherwise it doesn't know what to do. Although we could probably make this function constant, and that would fix that, possibly. But either way, that's just the safer way to set it up, so I'm not going to make that constant. Anyways, so that is that custom event, which the remote calls. What the authority does is it just simply goes and respawns the player. So that's how the client server works. And I made an input action suicide, which does the same thing, gets controlled pawn, casts to the base character, it checks basically the same thing, be our dead, so our check if we're dead. If true, we go into the switch has authority, and if the cast fails, we also go to the switch has authority. So that's suicide and UnrealTek we really don't need, but I was debugging, so that is that. And then in our actual player, we on car death, our custom event that we call when we die, after we do whatever player has been killed, we do a delay of 0.2 seconds, which you can probably bring down a little bit, but if you make no delay, then it doesn't have time to respawn before killing the player. However, there will be 2 players for a split second, obviously the delay amount. So we do a delay, and then we destroy our actor. So that's character death. And on rep health, what we do is, I guess that's it. Yeah, because what we're doing is in the player controller, we are checking if our health is less than or equal to 0, and if true, we go into switch as authority. So we'll probably move that, we'll like basically get rid of it, and then what we'll do is we will basically just add in a custom event here, and then we'll call it from probably on rep health. We'll do it before here. In fact, I'll make myself a little comment. I'll say replace PC tick stuff to here. So that is how the respawn works. I think that is all I changed for now. Yeah, let's check the event graph out real quick. Yep, I believe that is it. Still pretty basic, so yeah. If you don't have that destroy actor, you will get players sitting there. The bodies won't get garbage collected, basically it looks like. I was having that error stupidly for a while. Yeah, that is it, I think. Yep. Let me just make sure there was nothing else. Game instance stayed the same, I think. Still have selected team ID and selected class ID, which we're not using yet. We have our defined teams, defined as red and blue. Yep. Everything else is the same. Oh, player state, maybe, I think. Yeah, in player state, I don't know if I went over that. I added a integer, which is called team number. It's editable. 0 equals team red, 1 equals team blue at time of writing as prototyping. Its category is info, and then the bar, which is the backslash with shift, which creates a nested category, info teams. And then it's set to replicated, and it's set to transient, because we will be setting that. It doesn't need to be transient, but I was testing as that being a source of a bug, so I just left it since we'll be setting it anyway. And that is all we did in here. Yeah, so basically just started on the game state by just making this quick team setup, defining our teams, setting up team data replicated, and then the player controller, the request respawn, the game mode respawn player, and find spawn point functions. And the player start respawn has the team number as well as the player state. So instead of an hour, it's 20 minutes. And of course, the character, we make sure that we make sure that when health is less than or equal to 0, we call character death. We make sure that character death waits, it does a quick delay, and then destroys itself. And in the player controller, we're constantly checking if the controlled pawn locally is casted to the character, if the character that's controlling health is less than or equal to 0. If so, we go into a switch as auth. The client calls request player respawn, which runs on the server and is reliable, and the authority just goes into the end of that function, which just calls respawn player from the game mode casted. So yeah, that is that. And then in the next video, I was going to set it up so that we can have red and blue respawns in different points of the map. So we'll actually set up our teams maybe start working on a GUI again, just a quick little character selection GUI, not 3D yet, but just something quick to prototype with, and hopefully I'll have some gun models, some nice ones that I can give away with the project, and we can start doing some weapons. But if not, we'll start handling some core stuff like the teams and stuff, and once we get to classes, then we'll start doing some fun stuff with weapons. But if there's anything you want to see first, let me know and I will get to it first. But as it is right now, I will totally show you. As you can see, we have both players, 256, 257. So I can shoot him and deal my 5 damage till he dies. So boom, there's that split second delay. You can see in the message, I won't log here, but basically the server was killed and then requested a respawn. And so I can kill him all day long. You'll see that he respawned at a totally random point. And then if I go to the server, if I kill the client, you'll see has been killed and requests respawn. No, we don't see the log because he requested the respawn, and that print message isn't coming from the server. And you can see that he respawned there backwards. I have to flip that around, but yeah, he respawned there, totally random. Like I said, if I kill him again, respawns at a totally random point. And if 2 players respawn at the exact same point, I don't know if I can do that from here, but then if they're colliding, basically, then it will adjust the spawn point. But I do have overlap logic that I was working with. So no, he didn't try spawning on me, and it would probably take me quite a while to get him to spawn to this point with 4 possibilities. No, he tried spawning on me, so as you can see, he just fell off to the side and respawned it anyway. So yeah, that works. So yeah, if there's anything you want to see first, let me know. Otherwise, we'll work on getting actual teams working in the next video. So thanks for watching from the team here at UnrealTek, a division of BlenderTek.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, like it, subscribe as well. We take donations. We're on social media on the links on your screen. If you dislike this video, let us know why so we can improve them based on your input. So we'll see you next time, and remember, create you.